Talk. I'm Giselle Barrientos, your host for today. Let's be real. With everything that's happening around us, from personal, family, and financial issues down to socio-economic factors and current events, it can be really challenging to stay motivated at work, especially when we feel overwhelmed by anxiety. While companies highlight HMO as a key benefit alongside basic government benefits, it's also equally important to address mental health as it significantly affects employees' productivity and resilience in the workplace. But how can companies do it right? To zero in on this, we have with us today Anne Ordoña of Infinit Care to talk about how the mental health platform and their mental wellness programs are helping employers bridge this often overlooked gap. Hi, Anne. Glad to have you with us today.
I'm happy to be here.
Yes, like last time you were on Rappler was in 2022.
Yes.
I'm excited to see kung paano na nag-shift from then to now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say when we started the journey with Infinit Care, we always mention mental health, but we'd like to refer to it as mental well-being because for many organizations and individuals, when they hear the term mental health, it's equated to illness. And it's more than that. Being mentally well is all about your ability to respond to challenges. So it's not the absence of stress, but your ability to cope. So I'd really like to zero in on well-being because that's what we do at Infinit Care to support employee well-being.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited to talk more about that. But before we do, I want to know more about Infinit Care first. Yeah. So what is it about and what are the programs that Infinit Care offers?
So Infinit Care is a digital platform that offers well-being services to employees. We partner with organizations to provide support across the well-being continuum. So at the heart of it, we offer access to licensed mental health professionals like psychologists and counselors. But we also provide coaching services and chat care support to those who need immediate help. Beyond that, at an organizational level, we also provide support to building the organization's capability to support the well-being of their employees, such as training, helping leaders support their team members, even helping organizations come up with policies related to mental health and well-being, and including also forming well-being committees so that the organization feels equipped to respond to the needs of their team members.
Right. So very top-down approach rin siya.
Yes, because we believe that mental health is not just an individual problem. It's important that the organization invests in a culture that makes it safe for employees to speak up when they're going through challenges.
Right.
Yes.
And I love that it's a conversation now of a totality ng well-being. Kasi I think there's still the way that people think about health that it's just mostly a physical thing, diba? If you're not having a fever, you're fine. You know, things like that. So I'm happy that there's a service like Infinit Care that employers can look to. So let's talk about this well-being part. When would you say that well-being has become a priority versus an afterthought or a good-to-have thing that employers give?
Well, at the start, when we started Infinit Care way back in 2020, many organizations and employers offered this type of support as an afterthought because people were going through a lot of anxiety during the pandemic. So it was very reactive. And mostly, the programs were very ad hoc. So for example, it's World Mental Health Day in October. So they run programs to communicate the importance of mental health. So that is when you can see that it's just an option. It's a nice to have, something that you do to do some engagement with employees. However, when we see organizations that make it really a priority, it's embedded in their people strategy. What do I mean by that? For example, from training and development, looking at leadership development, for example, leaders are not just taught on how to lead their teams, but how to have real conversations where they can support their team members when they're going through tough times. So it's part of leadership development already. Others, it's become like a standard benefit, apart from access to HMO, you mentioned that earlier. Employees receive, for example, constant support. They can access psychologists at any time. There's a provision for that. And that is even extended to dependents. So that becomes also both like a talent acquisition and retention strategy. So employees are attracted to employers who display real care in the organization. They really walk the talk because it's embedded as part of their compensation and benefits. And it's a retention strategy because employees feel that when they go through something, the organization's response is not to fire them or bring them to an improvement plan program, but rather provide support first. No? So that's when it becomes really an embedded part of the organization. Last but not the least, you'll know that it's a priority when the organization really creates a culture where, as I really like the term psychological safety, when an organization creates that culture where employees feel that they can speak up, they can make mistakes without fear of judgment, and leaders really walk the talk. So that's when you know that it has already become part of the DNA of the organization.
Right. When your employees feel like they're human and can be human. Yeah. That's great. So I also know that Infinit Care is very data-driven. I was wondering if in your findings, are companies in the Philippines doing enough to address their employees' well-being issues?
Yeah. I think there's already a lot of progress. As I mentioned earlier, 5 years ago, it was really a reactive approach. There's a lot of progress in the sense that organizations, at the very least, have already included it as part of their HMO provision. For example, because the HMO organizations have also included this as part of their regular offering. But it's not enough in the sense that some organizations are still doing like a ticking the box kind of approach, no? So for example, as part of compliance, I need to have communication that employees know how to contact a professional. But beyond that, they're not doing enough from a culture and organizational development perspective. So for example, employees may have access to psychologists, but their leaders do not look after them, do not do regular one-on-ones. Or for example, when there's change in the organization, they're left on their own devices to really just navigate the change. And that still causes stress. So you're really not addressing the root causes or the areas of distress, no, that employees have. So that's where we see that there's still some progress that need to be made. The second thing is integrating different efforts. When traditional organizations look at mental well-being, for example, they see it as something as a standalone benefit rather than something that can actually be integrated into the different programs that an organization has. So there's progress that needs to be made there because from our data, because you mentioned data-driven, from our data, we're seeing that rarely is it just a mental health issue. When someone is burned out, for example, it's a combination of multiple factors. It can be the workload. It can be the environment. It could be the leader. It could be that they are going through personal issues, right? Financial issues, caregiving issues, breadwinner issues. So, what we're really seeing is that it's important that organizations see that everything is interconnected.
Right. I know na Infinit Care is a champion of the saying na there's no one-size-fits-all approach to health. Yeah. So how do you think can we expand the conversation na it's not just about mental wellness and physical wellness, na magkakabit sila, like what you mentioned. So how do we expand the conversation to be about mental wellness, physical wellness, and even financial wellness?
Right. So from our end, how we actually help organizations get to that point that they realize that they're interconnected is we use the data to support those new decisions. So for example, on a quarterly basis, we share well-being data with our clients, and we show why are people seeking support. And when we look at the data, in the last 3 years, we've seen consistently that in the top 3 issues that employees face, work issues is not one of them. So, one, love life issues and relationship issues they have, right? So it affects how people show up in the work. Second, financial issues. When someone goes through the day-to-day problems of how do I put food on the table, it causes distress. Third, health issues, right? It may not be their own health issues, but it could be that they are looking after someone who is going through health problems. So when we present this to organizations, we show them that when people seek help, it's just a symptom of something else, right? And this can help organizations tailor fit their support to employees. So for example, in the data, we've seen that women actually have lower well-being scores than men. And the reason behind that is they are juggling multiple responsibilities and perhaps feel more emotionally responsible for the relationships that they nurture in the home. So what does that tell us? Do we do enough women-targeted programs ba? So for example, if you see in the data that it's the women who are not feeling well, right? Perhaps it's a call for the organization to provide targeted support for that population. So that way, companies can actually tailor their programs. And I use that term a lot, tailoring. So there's at a certain demographic, you could offer targeted intervention, but also at an individual level. Now, so many companies run like well-being talks or webinars, seminars, etc. That's great when it comes to building awareness, but individuals may have their own specific needs, and that's also that part where the organization can adjust what would the whole employee population need, but what would individuals also need. So the data actually helps them provide that kind of targeted intervention.
Right. So this data is based on the Philippines, no?
Yes. So Infinit Care is largely supporting Philippine organizations. So yes, we've been collecting data in the last 5 years on, say, for example, well-being scores based on the World Health Organization's well-being index. So we do that. We collect data on what are the top reasons. I'd like to caveat and say that we don't share these individual data to companies because that's another important thing. Employees have basic distrust of sharing what they're going through because it might be taken against them, right? So when we actually share data with their employers, we aggregate it, we talk about different populations. But when I say individualized targeted data, because we have a mobile app that an individual can log into, the content that they see or the suggestions or tips on looking after themselves is very targeted to their own circumstance. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that as well.
Yeah, I get it. I think yung distrust na yun is also a symptom of the psychological safety.
Yes. There's still a lot of stigma around mental health. A lot of people are getting better at noticing that these are issues that should not be brushed aside, but there's work to be done also in reducing that stigma.
Correct. And I think talents in the Philippines nowadays are also asserting na this is what they want.
Yes.
And employers have to listen at this
Yes.
point. So I was wondering, ngayon, there's a lot of traditional approaches. We've got your free gym memberships, your workshops, your seminars. Does that still work?
Yeah, of course. Those still work. Employees generally appreciate benefits that address their lifestyle needs as well. But again, if they are seen as a standalone effort and not integrated into the total well-being strategy of the organization, it's not as effective. So it's important that organizations look at it holistically, right? So, for example, in our case, when we see, okay, the well-being data provided by the WHO actually tells us what are the factors that lead to reduced well-being. And you know what we've seen, that the top reason why employees have lower well-being scores is they're not getting enough rest. So people are not feeling well rested.
Yeah.
Okay? So if that's the case, then it's not a gym membership that will actually
Correct.
help the
Napagod ka
employee.
pa lalo.
Napagod pa. So what is important is then the organization looks at, for example, workload, time management. Are people doing a lot of overtime? Can we adjust? Can we be more flexible when it comes to the time that people stay in the office? Review the hybrid or remote work strategy, things like that, no? So for me, it's a call to go beyond surface level, nice looking benefits and really see how this impacts strategically the organization.
Yeah, and I think it's good that Infinit Care can help ask the right questions because sometimes employers are not quite sure ano ba yung tamang tanong to ask. So that's good. So we've been talking a lot about holistic approach. But now, balikan ko yung sinabi mo earlier about proactive versus reactive support. Let's zero in on that. How can employers differentiate proactive support versus reactive support? So, ano bang itsura when companies take too long to respond to their employees' needs? And how can early interventions make a difference?
Okay. Earlier, I talked about how when employers or individuals think about mental health, they think about illness. At Infinit Care, when we think about mental health, we actually look at the well-being continuum. That people slide from left to right in a continuum. They're not always ill. For example, if someone is stressed, that's not necessarily their default. There will be days when people are thriving, right? They're feeling good, they're performing well. Most days, people are in the middle. They're like, meh, okay, I'm okay, I'm fine, like that, no? So people slide left to right. When you're reactive, most of the programs will focus more on when people are in the crisis zone, right? So that's when people are already absent, they're in distress, they're not showing up at work, or they're not performing well. And most interventions are designed to address those who are in that period of their work life, right? Now, organizations that focus on that, to an extent, are successful because that's when people feel the pain, no? And therefore, when you get the help, then you feel grateful. But you don't have to wait for people to be already in distress to provide the help. So when they are thriving, or even when they're just in the middle, like feeling meh, you can actually provide programs that really support thriving in the work. So that's when, instead of just offering counseling, which is really helping someone go through a distressing time, you can offer coaching, right? Where you encourage individuals to look at what their goals are in the work, how they want to show up in the work. And coaching is something that can benefit those who are not actually anxious and depressed, but those, all of us who are actually most days are okay. So that's what I mean by looking at not just a reactive approach, but also being proactive.
I know that a lot of employees look to their leaders first, na parang, ano bang ginagawa ng leaders namin? So, it's really important and even powerful if leaders champion being aware of well-being and taking care of well-being. So, how can leaders model care without compromising performance?
Oh, that's a very good question because it's easier said than done. No? Balancing showing compassion while holding people accountable to the work. First of all, leaders have to model being open to talking about challenges. No? When leaders, for example, speak up, when they show vulnerability in the work, it actually gives license to the team members na, pwede palang magsabi that I'm not okay. And, it's acceptable to do that. So that's one. When leaders model being vulnerable, they invite people to actually speak up about their own challenges. When people are more transparent about what's going on, the leaders can then provide better support, right? So for example, if someone keeps being late, but there's no real conversation why that's the case, and perhaps the person really has issues because she is caring for a sick parent, right? If the leader demonstrates that you can safely talk about these issues in the work and that person speaks up, then there can be a real conversation around, do you need flexibility in the time? Do you need someone else to pick up the slack for now? The team can put in the work. So that's one, modeling the care.
Sometimes there's still a stigma about using mental health as an excuse. Na sinasabi mo lang yan, gusto mo lang na hindi ka magtrabaho today. Pero how can we break this type of skepticism in employers?
Well, first of all, there has to be some awareness building that has to happen. No, there has to be a conversation with leaders that, like for me personally, it's hard for me to say that I'm going through a tough time. I think many people, that's not the first thing that they will tell their boss na I'm not okay, because the default is actually to show that you're okay and that you're doing the work. So when someone actually approaches the leader and says, I'm not okay, that took a lot of bravery and courage to actually say, I'm not good, I'm not okay, I need to take a day off. So it's important that leaders recognize that it's a legitimate concern. Now, I do understand as a leader myself that it is easy to doubt whether it's really true that someone is going through something. But you go into that doubt if you actually don't know your team members. If leaders invest time in regular check-ins, getting to know their team members beyond the work, just saying on a Monday morning, how was your weekend? Or on a Friday, asking them, oh, what are your plans to relax, etc. When you get to know the people that you work with, when they actually approach you and say, hey, I'm not okay, then you'll know if it's real. Most leaders who doubt or are not sure, that's because you also don't know the people you are working with. So I'm really calling out people to, suspend judgment first. Get to know your people. And if people feel safe, they will speak up. And also, this abuse of mental health or using it as an excuse actually lessens, because individuals feel like, I can actually be true and say, and when they feel that they're trusted, they actually bring back more energy to the work. And, leaders have to also be comfortable with having difficult conversations. When they're asked to be more empathetic or to be more compassionate, that does not mean that you just accept all issues right away, right? It doesn't mean that. Compassion for me is also like tough love. For example, if someone is constantly absent and not performing, the leader has to also be brave enough to talk to the person and say, hey, you're not doing well. Tell me. And then you can work together and say, okay, may pinagdadaanan po ako, ganito, no? You can work on, okay, we'll give you the support, but remind the person that he also has to do the job. So that's also about setting boundaries, right? Na, you know what, we'll give you some leeway because of this and that. But these are the expectations that we have. So I always, I borrow from my favorite podcast host, Brené Brown, when she says, being clear is kind. So when leaders are clear on expectations, when they have real conversations, you're actually being kind to your employees. So don't be afraid to call them out also. Right? And in fact, they will learn from it too. So, yeah.
Grabe, no? It all just boils down to, kailangan alam mo na tao yung kasama mo.
Yes.
At tao yung mga katrabaho
Yes.
mo. At pwede rin nilang malaman na tao ka rin.
Yes.
It's really that simple, no,
Yes.
if you think about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're trying to bring back more human-centered approaches to the work.
I love the approach that Infinit Care is doing, and I think this is such an important conversation, especially in the Philippines, that there's still a lot of stigma, and we come from a lot of traditional conservative roots. So I'm super happy for the work that you do, and I'm so excited to see where else it heads out. Thank you so much, Anne, for talking to us today. And we have learned so much about addressing mental health in the workplace. If you'd like to talk more about health and wellness and look for a caring community, head on to the Health and Wellness channel at the Rappler Communities app. I'm Giselle Barrientos. Thank you for watching.